Hello, YouTube. Once again, this is your poster child for overactive brain disorder with another episode of the Kitchen Table Apologist. When last we left our intrepid adventure, I had just gone over my definition of God, namely an intelligence outside the world that can influence the events within it. And I discussed how it covers the major so-called negative attributes of God, such as immortality, invisibility, and intangibility, and some of the positive attributes that are normally cast as negative terms, such as omnipotence and omniscience. One of the things I did not mention, though, at that time was the perfection or holiness of God, and that will be the subject of today's offering. Well, to begin with, let's define perfection as it's used in this thing. Perfection in this case would mean that whatever decision God makes, whether to act or not to act, and what action to take when he decides to act, is the correct decision for this situation. Simply put, perfection is always doing the right thing, at the right place, in the right time. Perfection is not getting it so that nobody experiences pain. Let me say this again to make this perfectly clear. Perfection is not getting it so that nobody experiences pain. Remember the examples I gave of other worlds that we know of. Works of fiction, movies, role-playing games. We can even add video games to the discussion. In fact, I will be later on. The purpose of all of these is to tell a story. And one of the main aspects of a story is that part of their excitement revolves around how the characters overcame pains that happened in their past. Take Harry Potter, for example. We first run into him as a baby, being shuttled off to relatives who despise his very existence. His parents were killed off, and that's what precipitated that. As we go through, more bad things happen to him. He gets rejected by some of the professors. He gets people trying to kill him. All these various things. It just add on to the problems, and but we end up seeing that we understand why many of them happen, and in the end, we get to an ending that works the way it does because of what had taken place before. Now, in such a world with a well-crafted story, we get this kind of end perfection. Even with a human author, if that author is willing to take the time, the necessary time, to rewrite and edit that story into a perfect form, one that we can see is brilliant. That's what all the good works of fiction do, is that they're worked and and the plot holes are resolved and everything comes out right at the end. Now, to do this, the author might delete stuff from earlier drafts, and will have to. And for this purpose, it would be considered an imperfection, regardless of how beneficial and useful it may have seemed at the time when it was created. Now, the same sort of process can be involved in making a movie. Now, once you put the initial screen idea into motion, the director films the scene and cuts directs the actors there. Producers and editors choose the exact footage to cut and assemble the rest into a final product. Now, once you work this properly, every person's contributed to a perfect finished product in terms of what the story is and its production value. And so, at the end, you've got this long list of credits that reveal the gods, as it were. Those outside influences, outside of the world of the movie, that nonetheless influenced what happened to it, that made the movie what it is, for good or for bad. Now, I said I was going to talk about video games before. Now, here, once again, we have many people working on it to make it the best it can be. Even more basic details of the world are under the programmer's control. Various things like even individual laws of physics can be created, altered, or even suspended. The choices can even vary throughout the game. Like, you may have a section of the world where gravity works upward instead of downward. You can have something where, bullets bounce off of walls or off of other people, or things like that. These are the sorts of things that you can put in there, and whatever the programmers decide in those regards is what happens. You get to you get to save points. Most games have them. Where your progress can be recorded. And once you can reset to that point later if you don't like the result of what happened so far. From the point of the save onward, you can reset to that save point and choose a different path. Even the players now are contributing to making the game a perfect representation of what they want, as they edit out undesirable results and keep the ones they actually want. When it comes to multiplayer video games, especially those where the players can come from, virtually anywhere, worldwide, everything, the idea of balance begins to surface. I mean, some things will naturally be better than others because you can't theoretically. It's really hard to balance everything else so that everything works out. Everything's is equally powerful as one another. But sometimes things get really weird and knocked out of balance. Like maybe you've got these things called waterborne sewer knights, and they're massively overpowered in comparison to your other play choices. If someone figures that out, everyone's either going to start playing waterborne sewer knights or tailor whatever choice they do make so as to handle these massively overpowered and now massively more frequent waterborne sewer knights. The idea of diminishing fun for some, meaning those who play the waterborne sewer knights because they are the most powerful things in the universe, so that others can have fun either by cutting back on the power of the waterborne sewer knights or by giving the other choices tools to counteract the advantage of this uber powerful waterborne sewer knight. The idea of making the choice to cut back on something, inflict pain in one area to try to lessen the pain everywhere else becomes practical and understandable. Now, these considerations come into play more and more when dealing with a traditional tabletop role-playing game, Dungeons & Dragons being the most famous one. There is one thing to notice before we move on here. When we talked about the video game stuff, the powers that be actually lost one level of control. Portions of the past basically became fixed, as they were made by the players in the course of their actions. A set of rules was developed, and the players acted within those rules. Whatever happened remained a part of the world, because they were. Okay, let me talk. Okay, as part of the history of the world, it happened, and there's no getting around it. Game directors of role-playing games are not bound even to that, thanks to a little device called the retcon. Retcon. It's short for retroactive continuity. It refers to the selective editing and reworking of past events to fix plot holes and rebalance the world to make it more inhabitable, as it were. If a character opens up a rift, let's say Twin Inky Black Void, and as far as the way they saw it in the game, looked like the entire city got sucked into it. World's largest city, now in an inky black void. Well, the game director might choose to, use a retcon on that. Okay, well, maybe it was just all the stuff you could see from inside your castle walls or wherever it was you opened the inky black void. Just that part got sucked in, and the rest of it was stopped by a wizard, really powerful wizard who lived nearby. And and maybe you write in some things about what happens now that you've got this one section of the city that is now just gone. But anyway, these are the sorts of things that are involved in a retcon, and the game directors do them. They make them happen, and that's the end of the story. Simply put, as long as there's one person in the final control of the created world, he or she can make it so that the overall story is exactly what they want it to be. That all the stuff that yeah, all the stuff that should be happening happens. All the stuff that shouldn't be happening, well, quietly gets either doesn't happen or gets edited out thanks to a retcon. This person, calling the game director, is, as far as that world is concerned, perfect. It's nothing that person does can be challenged by the world's actual denizens, and nothing, even if they think of something better, that they might think is actually better than what the game director had originally selected, it'll either be rejected because the game director really has more knowledge of the situation and will know that it leads to a problem further down the road, or else it will be adopted via retcon so completely that the denizens will not remember things being any other way. In fact, will not even remember that that things could have been improved to what they are because it's already happened. So at this point, when you look at it this way, my original definition of God, the intelligence outside the world that can act on objects within it, even simulates the perfection that we see in the Christian God. This is so far the definition is holding, and I'm willing to run with it as far as it goes. So thank you for listening. That's all I have for today. Until we meet again, enjoy.